The twin rotors of the CH-47 Chinook beat the air into submission as it descended toward forward operating base Phoenix, kicking up a sandstorm that turned the Afghan sunset into an angry orange haze. Lieutenant Commander Jack "Doc" Morrison gripped his gear as the helicopter touched down hard, the way they always did in hostile territory, fast, aggressive, and ready to lift off at the first sign of trouble. Morrison was the first one off the ramp, his boots hitting the dusty ground with practiced ease. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen the elephant and lived to tell about it. His medical bag, battered and covered in Velcro patches from a dozen deployments, hung from his left shoulder. On his right shoulder hung something that made the waiting reception committee do a double take. A custom SR-25 sniper rifle in a drag bag, the kind of weapon that cost more than most soldiers made in 6 months. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brentwood, all 26 years of cocky infantry attitude, stood at the head of the welcoming party. His eyes went from Morrison's silver oak leaf rank insignia to the medical caduceus on his collar, then to the rifle. A smirk spread across his sun-weathered face. "Well, well," Brentwood announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look what the brass sent us. A doctor who thinks he's Rambo." The handful of younger soldiers behind him snickered right on cue. Morrison said nothing, just adjusted his gear and started walking toward the base command center. He'd heard it all before, ever since that IED in Helmand Province had sent shrapnel through his right shoulder 3 years ago. The injury had ended his career with SEAL Team 3, but it hadn't ended his service. While his body healed, he'd gone back to school, earned his medical degree, and returned to the teams as a medical officer. The SEALs didn't want him anymore, not for direct action, but the Navy still needed doctors who understood combat. "Hey, Doc," Brentwood called out, jogging to catch up. "You planning to shoot the enemy or give them a physical? Maybe check their cholesterol levels." More laughter from the peanut gallery. Morrison stopped, turned slowly, and looked Brentwood up and down with the same clinical assessment he'd give a patient. "Staff Sergeant," he said evenly, "in my experience, the loudest voices usually belong to men trying to convince themselves of something. What are you trying to convince yourself of?" The laughter died. Brentwood's face flushed red, but before he could respond, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Sergeant Brentwood." Colonel Patricia Vance strode across the landing zone, her small frame radiating command presence that made men twice her size step aside. "Commander Morrison, welcome to FOB Phoenix. Your reputation precedes you." Morrison snapped a salute. "Ma'am, happy to be here." "Bullshit," Vance said with a slight smile, returning the salute. "Nobody's happy to be in this sandbox, but you're here because I requested you specifically. Walk with me." As they headed toward the command center, Vance spoke quietly. "I read your file, Commander, all of it. 63 combat missions with SEAL Team 3, 47 confirmed kills as a sniper, Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with V device, Purple Heart. Then you get wounded, and instead of taking a desk job, you go to medical school and come back as a combat physician. That's either crazy or dedicated." "Little of both, ma'am," Morrison admitted. "Good, because what I'm about to ask you to do requires both." She handed him a tablet showing satellite imagery of a bridge spanning a deep ravine. "Camel Bridge. Only crossing point for 60 miles in either direction. Intelligence indicates the Taliban are planning something big there, and we've got a humanitarian convoy that needs to cross in 48 hours. Medical supplies for 3 villages that'll be cut off when winter hits next week." Morrison studied the terrain with a trained eye, immediately identifying potential sniper nests, ambush points, and fields of fire. "It's a kill box. They'll wait until the convoy is committed, then hit both ends simultaneously." "Exactly. Which is why I need someone who can provide medical support and eliminate threats. You'll be embedded with Brentwood's platoon." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "The staff sergeant who thinks I'm playing dress-up." The same one who's never seen real combat despite 3 deployments. Maybe you can teach him something before he gets his people killed." Vance's expression hardened. "This isn't a milk run, Morrison. The Taliban commander in this sector is smart and brutal. He's been hitting our supply lines for 6 months, and we haven't been able to touch him." "Then maybe it's time someone touched back," Morrison said quietly. That evening, during the mandatory weapons qualification for all incoming personnel, Morrison's performance silenced most of the mockery. The range officer set up targets at 800, 1,000, and 1,200 yards, distances most infantry soldiers couldn't reliably engage. Morrison went through his pre-shot routine with methodical calm, checking wind, humidity, temperature. Then he fired. 3 shots, 3 targets, 3 perfect hits at distances that made the range officer whistle low. Brentwood, watching from the sidelines, felt his confidence waver for the first time. He'd never made a shot past 600 yards in his life. He walked over to where Morrison was cleaning his rifle, a ritual performed with almost reverent care. "Lucky shots," Brentwood said, but his voice lacked conviction. Morrison looked up, and for just a moment, Brentwood saw something in those eyes that made his blood run cold. It wasn't anger or pride. It was the 1,000-yard stare of a man who'd taken lives and saved them, who understood the terrible mathematics of combat. "Sergeant," Morrison said softly, "there's no such thing as luck at 1,200 yards. There's only training, discipline, and the willingness to do what needs to be done." He patted his rifle gently. "I call her mercy, because sometimes the most merciful thing you can do is stop the killing before it starts." He stood, slinging the rifle over his shoulder alongside his medical bag. "We leave for Camel Bridge at 500. I suggest you get some sleep. You're going to need it." As Morrison walked away, Brentwood felt something he hadn't experienced in years: doubt. Maybe this medic was different. Maybe he really could fight. He had no idea just how right he was. The briefing room at FOB Phoenix was a converted shipping container with a struggling air conditioner that sounded like a dying animal. Maps covered every surface, held down by spent shell casings and empty coffee cups. At 600 hours, the room was packed with bodies: platoon leaders, engineers, medical staff, and intelligence officers all crowded around a large topographical map of the Camel Valley. Colonel Vance stood at the head of the table, her laser pointer tracing a red line across the map. "Gentlemen, ladies, this is Operation Lifeline. At 500 tomorrow, a convoy of 12 vehicles carrying critical medical supplies will depart this FOB and proceed to Camel Bridge." The laser stopped on a thin line crossing a deep blue ravine. "This bridge is our only option. The alternative routes add 4 days of travel time, and the weather forecast shows heavy snow moving in. Those villages need these supplies, or people will die. Children will die." Morrison studied the map intently, his mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and kill zones. The bridge itself was an aging suspension structure, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass. The ravine it crossed was over 300 feet deep, with the Camel River churning through rocks at the bottom. On both sides, rocky ridges rose like amphitheater seating, providing perfect elevated positions for anyone wanting to attack the bridge. "It's a perfect ambush site," Morrison said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. All eyes turned to him. 3 primary sniper positions on the north ridge, here, and here. He pointed without looking up from the map. "Machine gun nests on the south side, probably here and here to provide overlapping fields of fire. They'll let the convoy get halfway across before they blow the western approach, trapping everyone on the bridge. Then they'll take their time picking us apart." The room went silent. Brentwood leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Awful confident about enemy tactics for someone who's been on base for less than 24 hours. Morrison finally looked up, his eyes meeting Brentwood's. "I'm confident because it's exactly what I'd do if I wanted to inflict maximum casualties with minimum risk. It's Tactics 101, Sergeant. The Taliban commander in this sector isn't stupid. Captain Mansour has been running successful ambushes for 8 months. He knows we need this bridge, and he knows we're coming." Lieutenant Sarah Chen, the combat engineer, leaned forward with interest. A third-generation Chinese-American from San Francisco, Chen had a reputation for being both brilliant and fearless. "Commander Morrison's right. We surveyed this bridge last month. It's structurally sound but vulnerable. One well-placed charge could drop the whole thing into the ravine. If I were planning an ambush, I'd mine the western approach and have shooters on both ridges." "So what do you suggest, Doc?" Vance asked, genuinely interested. "We can't not do this mission. Those villages are counting on us." Morrison traced a route on the map with his finger. "We need overwatch positions established before the convoy moves. I'll take the eastern ridge here, 800 yards out. I can cover the north ridge sniper positions and most of the bridge. Chen's team needs to sweep the western approach for IEDs starting at 400 before dawn. And we need a dedicated QRF, quick reaction force, staged here, close enough to respond but far enough back to avoid the initial kill zone." Brentwood scoffed. "You're volunteering to sit on a rock with your fancy rifle while real soldiers do the actual work." "I'm volunteering," Morrison said with measured patience, "to eliminate threats before they can kill your men, Sergeant. A good sniper can do more to protect a convoy than an entire platoon in the wrong position. My job is to see the enemy before they see us and stop them before they can act." "Your job," Brentwood shot back, "is to patch up wounded soldiers. Maybe you should stick to what you're trained for." Morrison's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Private First Class Marcus Webb spoke up from the corner. The young radio operator, barely 21 years old, had been quiet until now. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, is it true you were with SEAL Team 3 during the Kandahar operation?" The room's atmosphere shifted. Vance's expression suggested she knew where this was going. Morrison remained silent. Webb continued, his voice steady but respectful. "Because my brother was there, Marine Corporal David Webb. He said a SEAL sniper held off an entire Taliban platoon for 40 minutes while the wounded were evacuated. Said the sniper took 27 shots and got 27 confirmed kills. Then, when the shooting stopped, that same SEAL came down from his position and spent the next 2 hours performing emergency surgery in a shot-up building, saving 6 Marines who would have died otherwise." Webb looked directly at Morrison. "My brother said that SEAL's call sign was Mercy. Said he was the most dangerous and the most compassionate man he'd ever met." The silence in the room was deafening. Brentwood's face had gone pale. Chen was staring at Morrison with new understanding. Vance allowed herself a small, knowing smile. Morrison stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Your brother is a good Marine, Webb. I hope he's doing well." He turned to the map, deliberately changing the subject. "Colonel, I'll need Chen's team to run a full structural assessment of the bridge before we commit the convoy, and I want topographical surveys of both ridges. If Captain Mansour is as smart as his track record suggests, he's already positioned his forces. I need to know where." Vance nodded. "Done. Chen, coordinate with Commander Morrison. Brentwood, your platoon will provide security for the convoy and establish defensive positions on the western side once the bridge is secured. Morrison will have overwatch." Brentwood opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. The story about Kandahar had spread through the ranks like wildfire during the years after it happened. He'd heard it himself, dismissed it as legend, exaggerated war stories told by Marines trying to make themselves feel better. But looking at Morrison now, the calm, clinical way he analyzed the battlefield, the absolute confidence in his movements, Brentwood realized the stories might not have been exaggerated at all. "One more thing," Morrison said, addressing the room. "Everyone in this convoy needs to understand something. The Taliban know we're coming. They've probably known for days. This isn't going to be a routine supply run. This is going to be a fight and people are going to get hurt. When that happens, when the shooting starts, I need every one of you to trust your training and trust each other. Panic kills more soldiers than bullets." He paused, his eyes scanning the faces around him. I'm here to do two things: eliminate threats and save lives. Sometimes I'll do them simultaneously. I need you all to be ready for both. Chen spoke up, her voice thoughtful. Sir, what do you need from my engineering team besides the bridge assessment? Morrison pulled out a small notebook covered in plastic, filled with neat handwriting and sketches. I need you to identify 3 demolition points on the northern approach. If we get overrun, we need to be able to deny the enemy use of the bridge. I also need creative cover positions established on the bridge itself, something that can stop small arms fire but won't compromise the structure. Can you do that? Chen's eyes lit up with the challenge. Absolutely. We can use the convoy vehicles themselves as mobile cover, reinforce them with sandbags and composite plating. If we position them correctly, they become hardpoints. Good thinking, Morrison made a note. Webb, I need you on the command net the entire operation. You'll be my eyes and ears for anything I can't see from my position. Think you can handle that? Webb straightened up, pride evident in his posture. Yes, sir, absolutely. Vance stood, signaling the briefing was ending. All right, people, we've got less than 24 hours to prepare. Get your teams ready. Dismissed. As the room emptied, Brentwood lingered, watching Morrison gather his maps and notes. Finally, he approached, his earlier bravado gone. Commander, I owe you an apology. Morrison looked up surprised. For what? For being an ass, for underestimating you. Brentwood struggled with the words. I've never been in a real fight, 3 deployments, and I've never fired my weapon outside of a range. Meanwhile, you've done things I can't even imagine. Morrison's expression softened slightly. Sergeant, the fact that you've done 3 deployments without firing your weapon means you've done your job well. You've kept your people safe. That's not something to apologize for. But tomorrow, Morrison interrupted gently, you're going to learn what you're made of. We all do eventually. Just remember, your job is to lead your men, keep them calm, and make smart decisions. My job is to handle the things you can't. Trust your training, trust your team, and for God's sake, trust that medics can fight when they need to. Brentwood managed a weak smile. Medics don't fight. That's what I said, isn't it? Morrison picked up his rifle case, the weight familiar and comforting in his hands. Sergeant, let me tell you something I learned a long time ago. Every person who carries a weapon into combat is a fighter. The only difference is what we're fighting for. You fight for territory, objectives, victory. I fight for the person bleeding out next to you. Neither is more important than the other. We're just different parts of the same mission. He headed for the door, then paused. Get some sleep, Brentwood. Tomorrow you're going to need to be sharp. Your men are going to be looking to you for leadership. Don't let them down. Alone in the briefing room, Brentwood stared at the map of Camel Bridge. For the first time in his military career, he felt the cold finger of real fear touching his spine. Not fear of death. That was abstract, easy to dismiss. But fear of failure, of letting his men down, of not being good enough when it mattered most. Outside, Morrison walked through the darkening fog toward the armory. He needed to zero his rifle, check his medical supplies, and prepare for what he knew was coming. Because despite what he'd told Brentwood, despite the confident analysis and careful planning, Morrison knew a fundamental truth about combat. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. Tomorrow, at Camel Bridge, people were going to die. His job was to make sure it was the right people, and to save everyone else, no matter what it cost him. He entered the armory, laid out his rifle, and began the familiar ritual of preparation. In combat, there were no second chances, only the prepared and the dead. Morrison intended to be the former and ensure the enemy was the latter. The Afghan dawn broke like a wound across the eastern sky, painting the Camel Valley in shades of crimson and gold. Morrison had been in position for 2 hours already, settled into a rocky outcrop 800 yards from the bridge's eastern approach. His ghillie suit blended perfectly with the sun-bleached stones and scrub brush, making him virtually invisible to anyone scanning the ridgeline. Through his scope, the world became a circle of crystal clarity. He could see the bridge in perfect detail, its rusted cables, worn wooden planks, the way it swayed slightly in the morning breeze. Below, the Camel River churned white over jagged rocks, a 300-foot drop that meant certain death for anyone who fell. "Overwatch in position," Morrison whispered into his radio. "I have eyes on the bridge and northern approaches. Nothing moving yet." Colonel Vance's voice crackled back. "Copy, Overwatch. Convoy departs in 15 minutes. Keep us informed." Morrison's breathing slowed, entering the meditative state that all good snipers cultivated. His heartbeat became a metronome in his ears, 60 beats per minute, steady and calm. Between heartbeats, the world froze. That's when you took the shot, in that microsecond of absolute stillness. He scanned the northern ridge systematically, sector by sector. There. A reflection, brief as a camera flash from a position exactly where he'd predicted. Someone was up there with optics, watching the bridge. Morrison marked the position mentally, then continued his scan. 2 more positions revealed themselves through tiny indicators: a bird that flew away suddenly, disturbed by movement, and a small puff of dust from someone shifting their weight. "Overwatch to command. I have 3 confirmed observer positions on the North Ridge. Coordinates follow." He rattled off the GPS numbers from his range finder. On the road below, the convoy began to move. 12 vehicles, a mix of MRAPs, cargo trucks, and Humvees, crawled toward the bridge in a line. Brentwood's platoon was spread throughout, providing security. Morrison could see Chen's engineering truck near the front, her team having already swept the western approach for IEDs in the pre-dawn darkness. The first vehicle, a massive MRAP, reached the bridge and began crossing. Morrison's finger rested lightly on his trigger guard, not the trigger itself. Not yet. The bridge's wooden planks creaked under the weight, the sound carrying clearly in the morning air. "So far so good," Brentwood's voice came over the radio, cocky and relieved. "Maybe your intel was wrong, Doc. Maybe they're not." The explosion cut him off mid-sentence. The third vehicle in the convoy, a supply truck loaded with medical equipment, erupted in a ball of orange flame. The IED had been expertly placed, hidden beneath the bridge's support structure where Chen's team couldn't detect it. The truck lifted into the air, twisted like a toy, and crashed onto its side, blocking the entire width of the bridge. Morrison's world slowed down. Training and experience compressed time into a series of crystalline moments. He saw the driver's door of the burning truck, jammed shut, saw flames licking toward the fuel tank, saw the northern ridge erupt with muzzle flashes as Taliban fighters opened fire from concealed positions. "Contact, contact, North Ridge," someone screamed over the radio. Morrison was already moving. His scope found the first target, a Taliban machine gunner setting up his PKM on a rocky outcrop. The man was 1,100 yards away, partially concealed behind a boulder. Morrison made microscopic adjustments for wind, elevation, and the Coriolis effect. His breathing stopped. His heartbeat slowed. Between one beat and the next, he squeezed the trigger. The SR-25 barked, the suppressor reducing the sound to a sharp crack. Through his scope, Morrison saw the machine gunner's head snap back, his body tumbling from the rocks. Before the body stopped falling, Morrison had cycled the bolt and found his next target. An RPG team, 2 men, one loading the rocket while the other aimed at the trapped convoy. Distance, 950 yards. Wind, 3 miles per hour left to right. Morrison led the shooter slightly, accounting for the man's movement, squeezed. The 7.62 round caught the RPG gunner in the chest, spinning him around. The rocket fired wild, spiraling into the empty sky before exploding harmlessly over the ravine. "Overwatch to all units. I'm engaging hostiles on the North Ridge. Count 3, no, 4, no, multiple targets. This is a coordinated ambush." The radio exploded with overlapping voices. Panic. Confusion. the sound of men who'd never experienced real combat suddenly drowning in it. Morrison forced himself to stay calm. He was the eye of this storm. Third shot, a Taliban spotter with a radio calling in coordinates for mortar teams Morrison couldn't see yet. The man dropped, his radio tumbling down the rocky slope. On the bridge, chaos reigned. Soldiers abandoned their vehicles, seeking cover that didn't exist. Bullets sparked off metal and stone. Someone was screaming for a medic, the sound every combat corpsman dreaded and lived to answer. Morrison's scope swept the carnage. The burning truck's fuel tank would explode any second. Men were pinned behind inadequate cover. And then he saw Brentwood, 50 yards from the burning truck, frozen in the middle of the bridge, his rifle hanging uselessly in his hands. "Brentwood, move," Morrison shouted into the radio. "Get your men to cover, northeast corner behind the MRAP." No response. Brentwood stood paralyzed, experiencing the universal soldier's nightmare, the moment when training evaporates and raw terror takes over. Morrison made a decision that violated every tactical principle he knew. He temporarily abandoned his sniper position, grabbed his radio, and screamed with every ounce of command authority he possessed. "Staff Sergeant Brentwood, your men are dying. Move your ass now." The words cut through Brentwood's paralysis like a slap. Morrison saw him physically shake himself, then start moving, grabbing soldiers and shoving them toward cover, finally becoming the leader his rank demanded. Morrison returned to his rifle. Fourth shot, Taliban fighter with an AK-47, firing from a spider hole at the eastern approach. Fifth shot, another RPG team setting up on a different part of the ridge. Sixth shot, a sniper Morrison spotted by the glint of his scope, 1,200 yards out, the longest shot Morrison had attempted in combat in 3 years. He adjusted for the extreme range, factoring in the morning thermals rising from the valley floor, the spin drift of the bullet over that distance, even the rotation of the earth itself at this latitude. It was a shot that required mathematics, instinct, and a little bit of faith. Morrison fired. 2 seconds later, the time it took the bullet to travel 1,200 yards, the enemy sniper jerked and fell from his perch. "Overwatch to command," Morrison reported, his voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through his veins. "I count 6 hostiles down, but there are more. This is bigger than we thought. They've got at least 20, maybe 30 fighters positioned around this bridge." Below, the burning truck's fuel tank finally exploded, sending a mushroom of black smoke into the pristine morning sky. The blast wave rocked the bridge, causing the ancient cables to sing a discordant note. Morrison watched 3 soldiers get knocked down by the concussion. One of them didn't get up. Through his scope, Morrison could see the man, a young private whose name he didn't know, lying motionless, blood spreading beneath him. 2 of his buddies tried to reach him but were driven back by accurate enemy fire. Morrison's jaw clenched. This was the moment every combat medic faced, the impossible calculus between being a sniper and being a healer. From his position, he could continue eliminating threats, protecting the convoy from a distance. But that wounded soldier would bleed out in minutes without immediate medical attention. "Overwatch to Chen," Morrison radioed. "I need someone to reach the casualty on the bridge, grid 42, STD 8736452891. Can your team get there?" Chen's voice came back, tight with stress. "Negative, we're pinned down. Every time we move, we take fire from the South Ridge." South Ridge. Morrison swung his scope to the southern side of the valley, the area he hadn't been able to fully surveil from his position. And there they were, a second ambush element he'd missed. At least 8 fighters with machine guns and rifles, positioned to create a crossfire that turned the bridge into a killing ground. It was a perfect ambush, exactly what Morrison would have designed. Cut off the convoy, pin them down from 2 directions, then systematically destroy them. Captain Mansour had earned his reputation. Morrison made his count. 6 hostiles eliminated, but at least 20 still active, probably more. His position was good for the North Ridge but marginal for the South. The convoy was trapped. Air support was 15 minutes out, an eternity in combat. The wounded soldier on the bridge had maybe 5 minutes before he bled out. Every instinct Morrison possessed screamed at him to stay put, maintain his strategic advantage, keep eliminating threats from distance. That's what a sniper did. That's what made tactical sense. But Morrison wasn't just a sniper. He was a combat medic, and somewhere in the burning chaos of Camel Bridge, a soldier was dying. Morrison began packing his rifle, his hands moving with practiced speed. Overwatch to all units. I'm displacing from my position. Going mobile. Negative, Colonel Vance's voice cracked with authority. Morrison, maintain your position. That's an order. Morrison slung his rifle across his back, checked his medical bag, and started climbing down from his perch. Respectfully, Colonel, I've got a soldier bleeding out on that bridge. Orders received and ignored. Overwatch out. He switched off his radio before Vance could respond, cutting off her protests. Morrison knew he was probably ending his career with this decision. Disobeying a direct order in combat was court-martial territory. But as he began his sprint toward the bridge, Morrison felt a strange clarity. This was why he'd become a medic in the first place. Not to hide from combat, but to run toward the worst of it, to the places where life and death balanced on a knife's edge. His boots pounded against the rocky ground. Bullets cracked overhead, kicking up dust around him. His shoulder, the one that had been shredded by shrapnel 3 years ago, began to ache with the familiar pain of old injuries protesting new abuse. Morrison didn't care. Somewhere ahead, a soldier needed him, and medics didn't abandon their own. Even if everyone thought medics didn't fight. They were about to learn different. Morrison covered 200 yards in 43 seconds, which would have been impressive for an Olympic sprinter, and was damn near miraculous for a 42-year-old man carrying 60 pounds of gear while being shot at. The world narrowed to a tunnel, the bridge ahead, the wounded soldier, everything else peripheral noise. A bullet whipped past his ear, close enough that he felt the displacement of air. Another sparked off a rock 3 feet to his left. The Taliban fighters had spotted him, recognized him as a high-value target by the way he moved, fast, direct, professional. They concentrated their fire. Morrison didn't slow down. He vaulted over a concrete barrier, his boots skidding on loose gravel, and dove the final 15 feet into the crater where Brentwood had taken cover. He hit hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs, but his hands were already reaching for his medical bag before his body stopped sliding. The crater was the result of a mortar round that had missed its target, creating a shallow depression behind the bridge's eastern support pillar. Brentwood huddled there with 2 of his men, Corporal Rodriguez and Private First Class Martinez, both wounded. Rodriguez had a through-and-through gunshot wound in his thigh, arterial blood pooling between his fingers as he tried to apply pressure. Martinez was worse, sucking chest wound, his breathing labored and wet. Brentwood's face was sheet-white, his hands shaking as he tried to reload his rifle. His eyes met Morrison's, and the young sergeant looked like a man staring into hell. "Doc, I can't, they're dying. I don't know what to do." "Shut up," Morrison said, not unkindly as his hands began moving with clinical precision. He assessed both casualties in seconds. Rodriguez, survivable with immediate intervention. Martinez, survivable with immediate intervention and a prayer. The soldier on the bridge 50 yards away, probably already gone, but Morrison forced that thought away. One crisis at a time. Morrison yanked a tourniquet from his bag, his movements so fast they blurred. "Brentwood, look at me, look at me." The sergeant's eyes focused. "Hold Martinez upright, keep him at a 45-degree angle. If he lies flat, he drowns in his own blood. Understand?" Yes, but..." "No buts, do it now." While Brentwood positioned Martinez, Morrison's hands worked on Rodriguez. Tourniquet high and tight on the thigh, above the wound. Rodriguez screamed, a sound that Morrison had heard 1,000 times and never gotten used to. The tourniquet cut off blood flow, stopping the arterial bleed instantly. Morrison's fingers found the pressure point, held it while he packed the wound with hemostatic gauze, the miracle substance that promoted clotting faster than natural processes ever could. "Stay with me, Rodriguez," Morrison said, his voice calm despite the bullets cracking overhead. "You're going to be fine. This is going to hurt like hell, but you're going to walk again, going to go home, going to have a stupid bar story about that time you got shot in Afghanistan." Rodriguez managed a weak laugh that turned into a groan. "Fuck, that hurts." "Good, pain means you're alive." Morrison secured the dressing, then injected morphine into Rodriguez's shoulder. "Brentwood, keep him still. Don't let him move that leg." Morrison turned to Martinez. The chest wound was bad, right side, fourth intercostal space. Lung collapsed, possibly nicked. Every breath Martinez took whistled, air escaping from the hole in his chest cavity. Without treatment, tension pneumothorax would kill him in minutes. Morrison pulled out a chest seal, an occlusive dressing designed for exactly this injury. "Martinez, listen to me. You're going to be okay. I'm going to seal this wound and then you're going to breathe easier. Count backwards from 10 for me." 10, 9, 8. Martinez's voice was weak, thready. Morrison applied the chest seal, creating an airtight barrier. The whistling stopped. Martinez's breathing immediately improved, color returning to his face. Morrison pulled out a 14-gauge needle catheter, terrifying to look at, life-saving in application. He felt for the space between Martinez's ribs, positioned the needle, and inserted it to decompress the chest cavity. The rush of air confirmed his diagnosis. Tension pneumothorax released. Martinez gasped, his first real breath in minutes. 7, 6, 5. Martinez continued counting, his voice stronger. Morrison set up an IV line, hung the bag on Brentwood's rifle, which he jammed into the ground vertically. Fluid replacement, prevent shock. His hands moved in a dance he'd performed countless times. Assess, treat, stabilize, reassess. 30 seconds of medicine that felt like 30 hours. A Taliban fighter appeared at the crater's edge, AK-47 raised. Morrison didn't hesitate. His right hand dropped to his sidearm. A Sig Sauer M18 he'd carried for 3 years, drew, aimed, and fired in one smooth motion. 2 rounds, center mass. The fighter dropped backward, rifle clattering on stone. "Jesus Christ," Brentwood breathed. Morrison holstered his pistol and returned to Martinez's IV as if nothing had happened. "Brentwood, I need you to focus. Can you do that?" The sergeant nodded, looking at Morrison with something approaching awe. "Good, listen carefully. Rodriguez is stable, keep pressure on that wound. Martinez needs to stay upright and calm. Talk to him. Tell him about home, about your family, about anything except where we are right now. His job is to keep breathing. Your job is to keep him focused on breathing. Can you handle that?" "Yes, sir." "Don't sir me. I work for a living." Morrison allowed himself a grim smile at the old military joke, then his expression hardened. "Now tell me exactly how many men you have, where they are, and what the tactical situation is. Short version." Brentwood's training finally kicked in, overriding his panic. 12 men total, 4 on the far side of the bridge with Chen, 3 trapped in that Humvee. He pointed to an armored vehicle 50 yards away, taking heavy fire, 2 more in the burning truck. I think they're dead. And Private Webb is behind the MRAP, manning the radio. The soldier I saw go down on the bridge. Brentwood's face fell. Private Kowalski took a round in the gut. He was trying to drag someone to cover when he got hit. Morrison's jaw clenched. Gut shot. Without immediate surgery, Kowalski had maybe 30 minutes, probably less. But Morrison was pinned in this crater with 2 critical casualties. Going for Kowalski meant leaving Rodriguez and Martinez. Staying meant Kowalski died alone on that bridge. The devil's choice, the one they never prepared you for in medical school. Through the smoke and chaos, Morrison's trained eye assessed the tactical situation. The Taliban had them in a perfect crossfire, North Ridge and South Ridge, maybe 25 fighters total. Every time someone moved, they drew concentrated fire. The convoy was broken, scattered, combat ineffective. But Morrison had seen worse. Kandahar had been worse. Helmand had been worse. This was bad, but it wasn't hopeless. Not yet. He keyed his radio, switching to the frequency he'd programmed for Chen. "Chen, Morrison, what's your status?" "We're pinned down hard, sir. Every time we move, we take fire from the South Ridge." "Can you see Kowalski from your position?" A pause. "Negative. Too much smoke and wreckage." Morrison's mind raced through possibilities, calculating angles and odds with the same precision he calculated bullet trajectories. Then he saw it, the one slim chance they had. "Chen, I need you to do something crazy." "Crazier than this?" "Much crazier. On my signal, I need your team to fire smoke grenades toward the bridge. Everything you've got. Create a screen between the South Ridge and the bridge. Can you do that?" "We can do it, but sir, that'll blind us too." "That's the idea, Brentwood." The sergeant looked at him. "How much ammo do you have?" Brentwood checked his magazines. 4 mags, maybe 120 rounds. Morrison pulled out his own rifle from where he'd slung it across his back. The SR-25 felt solid, familiar, deadly in his hands. He worked the bolt, chambering around, his eyes scanning the ridgeline. Through his scope, he found his next target, a Taliban fighter directing the assault, clearly a leader by the way others deferred to him. "Here's what's going to happen," Morrison said, his voice calm and absolute. "Chen creates smoke. Under that cover, I'm going to get Kowalski. While I do that, you're going to provide suppressive fire on the South Ridge. You don't need to hit anyone. You just need to make them keep their heads down. Think you can do that?" "But sir, leaving Rodriguez and Martinez." "They're stable for now. Kowalski isn't." Morrison met Brentwood's eyes. "I know this is your first real fight, Sergeant. I know you're scared, that's good. Fear keeps you sharp. But your men need you to be a leader right now, not a scared kid. Can you be that leader?" Brentwood swallowed hard, then nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good man." Morrison shouldered his rifle, his breathing slowing into the familiar rhythm. "Chen, execute smoke on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." White smoke grenades arced through the air, landing on the bridge and around it, creating an instant fog bank that turned the battlefield into a ghost world. Visibility dropped to 15 feet. Morrison didn't wait. He exploded from the crater, moving through the smoke like a wraith. His rifle came up and he fired, once, twice, 3 times, at muzzle flashes he could barely see through the white curtain. Behind him, he heard Brentwood's M4 open up, firing in controlled bursts. The smoke was both blessing and curse. It concealed Morrison from the enemy, but it also concealed the enemy from him. He moved by memory and instinct, counting steps, visualizing the bridge's layout from his earlier surveillance. 30 steps, 40, 50. He found Kowalski lying in a spreading pool of blood, one hand pressed weakly against his stomach. The kid couldn't have been more than 19, his face baby smooth under the dirt and blood. "Medic," Kowalski whispered. "I'm here, son, I'm here." Morrison dropped to his knees, his hands already assessing the wound. Entrance wound lower right abdomen. No exit wound. The bullet was still inside, probably bouncing around, causing catastrophic internal damage. This was bad. This was very bad. Morrison pulled out an Israeli bandage, the most effective field dressing ever invented, and packed it against the wound. Not enough. He added hemostatic gauze, compressed hard. Kowalski screamed. I know, Morrison said, working frantically. "Stay with me, Kowalski. What's your first name?" "Danny, Daniel." "Okay, Danny, you're going to make it. I promise you're going to make it, but I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that for me?" Danny nodded weakly. Morrison lifted him in a fireman's carry, the kid's weight impossibly light despite his gear. The smoke was beginning to clear. They had seconds, maybe less. Morrison ran. Morrison's legs burned as he carried Kowalski through the dissipating smoke, every step a race against bullets and time. He made it back to the crater just as the white curtain lifted, revealing their position to the enemy. Rounds immediately began impacting around them, chewing up concrete and stone. He slid into the crater, laying Kowalski beside Martinez. 3 critical casualties now, all needing immediate surgical intervention he couldn't provide. Brentwood stared at Morrison with wide eyes. "Sir, the convoy commander is ordering a full retreat. They want to pull back to the FOB." Morrison's hands never stopped working on Kowalski as he processed this information. A retreat meant abandoning the bridge, abandoning the mission, abandoning the villages that needed those medical supplies. It meant tactical defeat. But it also meant saving the lives of the soldiers still able to fight. He keyed his radio to the command frequency. "Colonel Vance, this is Morrison." "Commander, thank God. We're ordering immediate withdrawal. The bridge is lost." Morrison looked at the chaos around him, burning vehicles, wounded men, an enemy that had them pinned and was methodically destroying them. Every tactical instinct he possessed screamed that Vance was right. Retreat was the smart play. Then his eyes fell on the medical supplies in the burning trucks: antibiotics, surgical equipment, vaccines for children. Winter was coming to those mountain villages. Without these supplies, people would die. Not soldiers who chose this life, but civilians. Kids. "Negative, Colonel." Silence on the radio, thick with disbelief. "Say again, Commander." Morrison's voice was calm, measured, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "The bridge can be held, ma'am, but I need you to trust me. Give me 30 minutes. Morrison, I have reports of 30+ enemy fighters. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and I can see something you can't from your drone feeds," Morrison interrupted. "The Taliban are hurting us, Colonel. They've got a secondary ambush point 2 clicks west. I saw the prepared positions during my initial recon. If we retreat now, we drive straight into it. They'll massacre the convoy in the open desert. Our only chance is to push through, and that means holding this bridge." He could almost hear Vance calculating odds, measuring possibilities. "Finally, what do you need?" 30 minutes. After that, air support can clean up. But someone needs to hold this bridge long enough for the convoy to reorganize and cross. The medical supplies need to get through. You're talking about a holding action, a last stand. Morrison looked at his 3 critical patients, at Brentwood's frightened young face, at the bridge that had become a killing ground. "I'm talking about doing our job, ma'am. We came here to deliver medical supplies to people who need them. That mission hasn't changed just because it got hard." Another pause, then, "You have your 30 minutes, Commander. Air support is en route. Don't die being a hero." "Heroes get people killed, Colonel. I'm just being a medic." He switched frequencies. "All units, this is Morrison. New mission, we hold this bridge. Chen, what's the structural integrity?" Chen's voice came back, strained but professional. "The bridge can take the weight, but another explosion could drop it. We need to get the burning truck off before the fuel creates a sustained fire that weakens the cables. Webb, can you coordinate with Chen's team to push that wreck over the side?" "Sir, we'd need a vehicle with enough power, and we'd have to expose ourselves too." "I know what we'd have to do, Webb. Can it be done?" A pause. "Yes, sir, it can be done." Morrison made his decision, the one that would either save them all or kill them. He looked at Brentwood. "Sergeant, you're going to hate what I'm about to tell you." "I already hate everything about this day, sir." "Smart man. Here's the situation. I'm going to reposition to the bridge itself. That MRAP," Morrison pointed to the armored vehicle 50 yards away, "gives me cover and sight lines to both ridges. From there, I can provide suppressive fire while the convoy reorganizes." Brentwood's face paled. "That's suicide. You'll be completely exposed." "I'll be where I need to be." Morrison began repacking his medical bag with essential supplies only: tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, chest seals, morphine. Everything else he left. "Your job is to keep these 3 alive until medevac arrives. Think you can handle that?" Yes, but sir, you can't." Morrison gripped Brentwood's shoulder hard. "Listen to me. In about 5 minutes you're going to understand something about yourself. You're going to discover that you're stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and more capable than you ever imagined. Those men," he gestured to Rodriguez, Martinez, and Kowalski, "they're going to live because of you. Not because of me, because of you. You're going to save their lives, and that's going to change who you are forever." Tears ran down Brentwood's face, cutting tracks through the dust and smoke. "I don't know if I can do this." "You can, you will, because you're a United States Marine, and Marines don't leave their people behind." Morrison pulled out his Sig Sauer, checked the magazine, chambered a round, and handed it to Brentwood. "Extra insurance. Anyone comes at this position who isn't wearing our uniform, you put them down. No hesitation, no mercy. Understand?" Brentwood took the pistol with shaking hands. "Yes, sir." Morrison gathered his rifle and his much lighter medical bag. Before he left the crater, he looked back at the 3 wounded men. Rodriguez was unconscious but stable. Martinez was breathing easier, the chest seal doing its job. Kowalski was the question mark. Gut shots were unpredictable, catastrophic internal bleeding could kill him any second. "Stay alive," Morrison told them. "That's an order." Then he was moving again, sprinting toward the MRAP through a hurricane of gunfire. Bullets sparked off the bridge's metal railings. A round hit his medical bag, tearing through it, scattering supplies he didn't have time to retrieve. He dove behind the MRAP just as an RPG whooshed overhead, missing by 3 feet and exploding against the ravine wall in a shower of rock fragments. Webb was there, hunched behind the vehicle's massive tire, his radio crackling with desperate voices. The young private's hands shook as he tried to maintain communications. "Sir, Chen says she can push the burning truck in 90 seconds, but she needs covering fire." Morrison didn't answer with words. He brought his rifle up, resting it across the MRAP's hood, and began engaging targets with methodical precision. Northridge first, the machine gun nest that had been chewing up anyone who moved. Morrison's first shot killed the gunner. His second killed the loader who tried to take over. His third destroyed the weapon itself, the heavy round punching through the receiver and rendering it useless. South Ridge next. Morrison counted 6 fighters, shifted position to get a better angle, and began working through them. 1 shot, 1 kill. 2 shots, 2 kills. His rifle became an extension of his will, each trigger press a decision between life and death. "Go Chen, move now," Morrison shouted into his radio. He heard the roar of an engine as one of Chen's engineering vehicles rammed the burning truck. Metal screamed against metal. For a heart-stopping moment, the truck didn't budge. Then it shifted, tilted, and with a shriek of tortured steel, it toppled over the side of the bridge, tumbling 300 feet before smashing into the river below in an explosion of spray and flame. The bridge was clear. "Webb, tell the convoy to move, now, before they can reposition." But the Taliban weren't done. Morrison saw them massing on the western approach, at least 15 fighters preparing for a final assault. They'd realized the same thing he had. Whoever controlled the bridge controlled the battle. They were coming to take it. And Morrison was right in their path. He checked his ammunition. 3 magazines left. 90 rounds against 15 fighters, plus whoever was still active on the ridges. The math wasn't good. But Morrison had never been good at math anyway. He settled into position behind the MRAP, his rifle rock-steady despite the adrenaline screaming through his system. Webb crouched beside him, white-faced but determined. "Sir, should I "Stay on that radio," Morrison interrupted. "Keep coordinating, that's your weapon right now." The Taliban began their rush, moving with the confidence of men who knew they had superior numbers. They advanced in a loose skirmish line, firing as they came. Morrison took a breath, let it out slowly, and began to work. First target, the leader, identified by his position and the way others looked to him for guidance. Morrison's shot took him in the chest. He fell, and the advance hesitated. Second target, the man trying to take over leadership. Third target, the fighter with the RPG. Fourth, a machine gunner trying to set up a support position. Morrison's rifle sang its deadly song, and the Taliban advance began to falter. But they kept coming, and Morrison's ammunition was running out. This was going to be close. Morrison's world compressed into a rhythm older than civilization itself. Breathe, aim, fire, cycle, repeat. His SR-25 had become an instrument of surgical violence, each shot a decision to preserve life by taking it. The Taliban fighters advancing on the bridge learned a terrible lesson. Distance was Morrison's ally, and every step closer to him was a step closer to death. 15 fighters became 12, 12 became 9. But they adapted. The survivors began using covering fire, moving in bounds, professional tactics that spoke of training and experience. These weren't untrained militants. This was Captain Mansour's best squad. Morrison's first magazine ran dry. He dropped it, slapped in a fresh one, never taking his eye from the scope. 9 fighters became 7. But they were getting closer now, within 200 yards, close enough that Morrison could see their faces, see the determination in their eyes. A round sparked off the MRAP's armor 3 inches from Morrison's head. Another punched through his medical bag, destroying his last IV kit. They'd ranged him now, knew exactly where he was. "Sir, they're flanking left," Webb shouted, pointing to 3 fighters who'd broken from the main group, using the bridge's support structure as cover. Morrison swung his rifle, tracked the lead flanker, fired. The man dropped, but the other 2 made it to cover behind a concrete pillar now only 50 yards away. Too close, way too close. Morrison's tactical brain screamed warnings. He was about to be overrun. The smart play was to fall back, link up with Chen's position, establish a new defensive line. The smart play was survival. But falling back meant abandoning this position, meant giving the Taliban control of the bridge's center, meant the convoy couldn't cross, meant those medical supplies wouldn't reach the villages, meant children would die of treatable diseases when winter came. Morrison stayed. "Webb, get behind me. Tighten up." Morrison's voice was combat calm, that eerie steadiness that came when a warrior accepted what was about to happen and made peace with it. He transitioned his rifle to his weak side, freeing his strong hand to draw his combat knife, a 7-inch Kabar that had seen action on 4 continents. The 2 flankers rushed simultaneously, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm a single defender. They were fast, experienced, deadly. Morrison was faster. He shot the first fighter at 15 feet, center mass, the heavy 7.62 round punching through the man's chest and spinning him sideways. The second fighter was already on him, too close for the rifle. Morrison reversed his grip on the SR-25, using it as a club, smashing the buttstock into the man's face. Bone crunched. The fighter stumbled but didn't go down, bringing up his AK-47. Morrison dropped his rifle, stepped inside the AK's muzzle, and drove his knife up under the man's ribcage with the precision of a surgeon who knew exactly where the heart was located. The fighter's eyes went wide. He tried to speak. Blood bubbled from his lips instead. Morrison withdrew the blade and the man collapsed. No time to process. No time to feel. 4 more fighters were charging the bridge, and Morrison's rifle lay on the ground, covered in blood. He snatched it up, wiped the scope with his sleeve, brought it to his shoulder. Fired. Missed, His hands were shaking now, adrenaline and close combat disrupting the zen-like calm required for precision shooting. Second shot connected. 3 fighters left. An RPG whooshed from the south ridge, impacting the MRAP's front quarter panel. The explosion lifted the multi-ton vehicle 6 inches, slamming it back down. Morrison felt the shock wave punch through his body, his ears ringing, vision blurred. Through the ringing, he heard Webb screaming into the radio. "We need air support now. They're overrunning our position." Morrison blinked away blood, his own, from a fragment that had opened his scalp. The 3 remaining fighters were 50 feet away and closing. His rifle came up, but his hands wouldn't cooperate, couldn't find the trigger. A round hit him low on the left side, just above his hip. Morrison grunted, felt the hot spike of agony, felt his left leg give out. He dropped to one knee. The fighters closed to 30 feet, victory in their eyes. They could see Morrison was hit, see him struggling. They raised their weapons for the final shots. Morrison's training overrode the pain, overrode the shock, overrode everything except the mission. His hands steadied. His breathing regulated. Between one heartbeat and the next, the shaking stopped. 3 fighters at 30 feet. Morrison fired 3 times in 2 seconds. 3 bodies hit the ground. The assault broke. The surviving Taliban fighters on the western approach, seeing their best men dead or dying, lost their nerve and retreated back toward the ridgeline. Morrison sagged against the MRAP, his hand going to his side. The wound was bad. He could feel the bullet lodged against his pelvis, could feel blood soaking his uniform. His medical training kicked in automatically, assessing his own injury with clinical detachment. Gunshot wound, lower left quadrant. Entrance, no exit. Moderate to severe bleeding, partially controlled by his web gear creating pressure. No arterial damage. He'd be dead already if it hit the femoral. Possible internal organ damage. Pain level, 7 out of 10 and climbing. Survivable, barely. "Sir, you're hit," Webb crawled to him, his young face pale with fear. "I'm fine," Morrison lied, pulling a hemostatic dressing from his shredded medical bag. "Help me pack this." "But sir—" "Do it." Webb's hands shook as he helped Morrison pack the wound. The pain was extraordinary, beyond anything Morrison had felt since the IED that ended his SEAL career. But pain meant alive, and alive meant he could still fight. Through the ringing in his ears, Morrison heard the most beautiful sound in the world: helicopter rotors, heavy rotors, Apache attack helicopters. "All units, this is Viper Lead," a calm voice announced over the radio. "We have eyes on your position, cleared hot. Get your heads down." Morrison allowed himself to collapse against the MRAP as the Apache opened fire. Their 30 chain guns tore apart the Taliban positions with precision that was almost artistic. Hellfire missiles turned the machine gun nests on the ridges into craters. The remaining enemy fighters broke and ran, and the Apache hunted them without mercy. The battle for Camel Bridge was over. Morrison had held for 22 minutes. "Webb," Morrison said, his voice weak, "tell the convoy to move. Get those supplies across. That's the mission." "Sir, you need a medevac. You're bleeding." "After the convoy crosses." Morrison's eyes were hard despite the pain. "We didn't hold this bridge so we could quit with the mission half done. The supplies cross first. Understand?" Webb nodded, tears streaming down his face, and began coordinating on the radio. Through dimming vision, Morrison watched the convoy vehicles begin moving again. One by one, they crossed Camel Bridge, carrying their precious cargo of medical supplies toward villages that would survive the winter because of what happened here today. Chen appeared, kneeling beside Morrison, her face smudged with smoke and blood. "You magnificent bastard, you actually did it." "We did it," Morrison corrected, his words slurring. He was losing too much blood, going into shock despite his attempts to control it. "How many casualties?" 3 KIA, 7 wounded, 3 critical, but you saved." Jesus, Morrison, you saved 47 lives today. The convoy is intact. The mission is. Good, Morrison interrupted. His eyes found the bridge, watched the last supply truck cross to safety. That's good. His vision tunneled. The pain faded to a distant throb. He heard voices shouting for a medic, which struck him as darkly funny since he was the medic. The last thing Morrison saw before unconsciousness took him was Brentwood running across the bridge, limping but alive. The three critical patients apparently stable enough that he'd left them. The sergeant's face swam into focus above him. "Stay with us, Doc, please, we need you." Morrison managed a weak smile. "Medics don't fight, right?" Then darkness claimed him, and Jack Morrison knew nothing more. But he'd done his job. He'd held the bridge. He'd saved his people. For a warrior healer, there was no greater victory than that. Morrison woke to the rhythmic beeping of medical monitors and the antiseptic smell of a field hospital. Pain radiated from his side, his shoulder, his head, a symphony of injuries that told him he was still alive. Dead men didn't hurt this much. He tried to sit up. A hand gently pushed him back down. "Easy, sir. You've got a chest tube, 2 drains, and enough stitches to qualify as a quilt." The voice belonged to Captain Sarah Chen, who sat beside his bed in fresh fatigues, her arm in a sling. "Doctor's orders are strict bed rest." Morrison's voice came out as a rasp. "My patients, Rodriguez, Martinez, Kowalski, status." Chen smiled. "All 3 stable and evacuated to Landstuhl. Rodriguez is already talking about the scar impressing girls back home. Martinez proposed to his girlfriend via satellite phone yesterday. And Kowalski," her voice softened. "You saved his life, sir. The surgeon said another 5 minutes and the internal bleeding would have killed him. He's going to make a full recovery." Morrison's eyes closed briefly. 3 lives, 3 families who would see their sons again. The pain in his side suddenly felt more bearable. "How long was I out?" 36 hours. You coded twice in surgery. Lost so much blood they had to fly in emergency supplies from Kandahar." Chen's expression turned serious. "The docs say you're the stubbornest patient they've ever seen. Your body should have shut down from blood loss and shock, but you kept going through sheer willpower." "Training," Morrison murmured. "SEALs don't quit." "Former SEAL," Chen corrected with a grin. "You're strictly medical corps now, remember." The tent flap opened, and Colonel Vance entered, her uniform crisp despite the dust and heat outside. She stood at attention beside Morrison's bed. "Commander Morrison, how are you feeling?" "Like I got shot, ma'am." Vance's lips quirked. "Your sense of humor survived intact, I see." She pulled out a folder. "I'm here in an official capacity, what you did at Camel Bridge. There are words for that kind of action. Heroic, suicidal, magnificent, incredibly stupid." "I was just doing my job, Colonel." "Your job was to provide medical support, not single-handedly hold a bridge against 30 Taliban fighters." Vance's voice hardened. "You disobeyed a direct order to maintain your position. You abandoned tactical advantage to render aid. You put yourself in the most exposed position on the battlefield and refused to retreat when ordered." Morrison met her eyes. "Yes, ma'am, I did all those things." "Which is why," Vance continued, "I'm recommending you for the Navy Cross. The citation will read that your actions directly saved 47 American lives and ensured the success of a critical humanitarian mission." She paused. "Off the record, you're a crazy son of a bitch, and I'm damn glad you were on our side." Before Morrison could respond, the tent flap opened again. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brentwood entered, walking stiffly but without assistance. Behind him came Private Webb, Corporal Chen's engineering team, and a dozen other soldiers from the convoy. They stood at attention, forming ranks beside Morrison's bed. Brentwood's voice was steady, formal. "Sir, we wanted to thank you. All of us owe our lives to what you did on that bridge." He paused, emotion cracking through his military bearing. "And I wanted to apologize For everything I said, for doubting you, for being a cocky asshole who thought he knew what combat was about." Morrison shook his head slowly. "Sergeant, you did your job when it mattered. You kept those 3 men alive. You provided covering fire when I needed it. You didn't run when things got bad. That's all any commander can ask." "Sir, I froze. You saw it. I panicked." "For about 10 seconds, yes. Then you unfroze and became the leader your rank required. That's not failure, Brentwood. That's growth." Morrison's eyes swept the assembled soldiers. "Every one of you performed beyond expectations. Webb kept communications running under fire. Chen cleared the bridge. You all held your positions when most people would have broken. You should be proud." Webb stepped forward, his young face serious. "Sir, we've been talking about what you said about medics needing to fight and fighters needing medical training. We want to learn, all of us." Morrison looked at the faces around him. Young soldiers who'd seen combat for the first time, who'd watched their medic become a warrior and their warrior become a healer. An idea began forming, something that had been germinating in his mind for years. "Colonel Vance, permission to speak freely." "Granted." Morrison pushed himself up despite the protests from his body. What happened at Camel Bridge shouldn't have been necessary. If more soldiers had advanced medical training, Rodriguez could have self-faded. If I'd had more combat-trained personnel in defensive positions, I wouldn't have needed to be in 3 places at once. The division between combat arms and medical corps is artificial. It gets people killed. Vance's eyes narrowed with interest. "What are you proposing, Commander?" "A training program, cross-training combat soldiers in advanced medical techniques and medical personnel in tactical operations. Not just basic first aid, real trauma medicine. Not just weapons qualification, actual combat tactics." Morrison's voice grew stronger despite his injuries. "We call it the Bridge Protocol. After today, after what we learned." The tent was silent as everyone processed this. Brentwood spoke first. "Sir, I volunteer. Whatever you need, I'm in." "Me too," Webb added immediately. Chen nodded. "My whole team volunteers." One by one, every soldier in the tent volunteered, until Morrison was looking at the foundation of something that could change how the military approached combat medicine. Colonel Vance studied Morrison for a long moment. "This is ambitious. It'll require approval from the Pentagon, curriculum development, instructor certification. It could take years." "I have years, ma'am. And I have 47 soldiers who will tell anyone who will listen why this matters." Vance pulled out her tablet, made some notes. "I'll make some calls. The military loves innovation when it's backed by success. What you did at Camel Bridge is already becoming legend. People will listen." She looked up. "But first you heal, properly. No shortcuts, no rushing back to duty. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." After Vance left, the soldiers remained, sharing stories from the battle. Morrison learned details he hadn't known, how Webb had talked a wounded soldier through self-aid using techniques he'd watched Morrison demonstrate, how Chen had improvised blast shields from vehicle parts, how Brentwood had held the crater position for 90 minutes, keeping 3 critical patients alive through pure determination. They'd all been heroes that day. Morrison had just been the most visible. That evening, alone with his thoughts and his pain medication, Morrison stared at the tent ceiling. The Bridge Protocol. It felt right, felt like something he was meant to do. Not just save lives in the moment, but create a system that saved lives forever. His last thought before sleep took him was simple. Camel Bridge had been the test. The Bridge Protocol would be the legacy. And somewhere, 47 families would never know how close they came to receiving folded flags instead of returned sons. That was enough. That was everything. 6 months later, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The classroom held 30 students, 15 combat medics and 15 infantry soldiers, all sitting uncomfortably in mixed seating that violated every tribal instinct the military had spent years instilling. Medics traditionally sat with medics. Grunts sat with grunts, but the bridge protocol had different rules. Commander Jack Morrison stood at the front, his gait slightly uneven from the lingering effects of his hip injury. Behind him hung a photograph, 47 soldiers standing at attention on Camel Bridge, holding a banner that read MEDICS Fight 2. And mounted on the wall, encased in glass, was his SR-25 sniper rifle, Mercy, its wooden stock carved with 47 hash marks. Not for kills, for lives saved. "Welcome to Bridge Protocol, Class 1, Morrison began, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd earned every word he spoke. "Some of you are here because you volunteered, some because your commanders volunteered you, some because you think this is going to be an easy credit." He paused, his eyes scanning the faces. "You're all wrong about what this course is." He clicked a remote, and the screen behind him displayed a simple equation. Warrior plus healer equals complete soldier. The military has spent centuries creating a false choice. You're either a killer or a healer. Either you fight or you save. This course exists because that dichotomy gets people killed. At Camel Bridge, I was forced to be both simultaneously, not because I'm special, but because the situation demanded it. Every one of you will face similar situations. The only question is whether you'll be prepared. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brentwood, now Morrison's assistant instructor, stood from his seat. His transformation over 6 months had been remarkable. The cocky, untested platoon leader had become a serious, focused teacher. "Sir, I'd like to address the class." Morrison nodded, stepping aside. Brentwood faced his peers. "6 months ago, I mocked this man, called him a nurse-playing soldier. Told my men that medics don't fight, that they hide while real warriors do the work." His voice thickened. "At Camel Bridge, I watched Commander Morrison eliminate 16 enemy combatants while simultaneously coordinating medical care for multiple casualties. I watched him get shot and keep fighting. I watched him save 47 lives, including mine, because he refused to accept the lie that you can only be one thing." He held up his right hand, showing a thin scar across his palm. "This scar came from holding pressure on my own leg wound while Commander Morrison worked on 2 other casualties. He taught me how to save myself so he could save others. That's what this course is about, making every soldier capable of being a complete warrior." Morrison returned to the front. The bridge protocol has 3 phases. Phase 1, combat medicine for infantry. You'll learn to manage airways, control hemorrhaging, treat sucking chest wounds, and perform emergency procedures that will keep your teammates alive until evacuation. Phase 2, tactical operations for medics. You'll learn weapon handling, marksmanship, small unit tactics, and how to fight your way to casualties. Phase 3, integration. You'll run live exercises, where both skill sets must be employed simultaneously. A hand raised, Private First Class Marcus Webb, who'd earned his corporal's stripes and transferred to Fort Bragg specifically to be part of the protocol's first class. "Sir, how do you balance the two? How do you know when to shoot and when to heal?" Morrison's expression grew distant, remembering the moment on Camel Bridge when he'd made exactly that choice. "You don't balance them, Webb. You integrate them. Every tactical decision has a medical component. Every medical decision has a tactical component. When I eliminated that machine gun nest on the North Ridge, I wasn't just killing enemy fighters. I was removing a threat that would have wounded or killed friendly forces. When I ran across open ground to reach casualties, I was accepting tactical risk for medical necessity. They're not separate decisions. They're the same decision viewed from different angles." He advanced the slide, showing tactical medical scenarios. "Here's what you need to understand. The enemy doesn't care if you're a medic or a rifleman. They'll kill you either way. Your teammates don't care what your job description says. They care that you can keep them alive. The mission doesn't care about your specialty. It cares about results. The bridge protocol exists to give you the tools to deliver those results, regardless of what your uniform says you are." Over the following weeks, Class 1 was broken down and rebuilt. Infantry soldiers who'd never inserted an IV learned to start lines in moving vehicles under simulated fire. Medics who'd never engaged targets beyond qualification ranges learned to make precision shots at distance. Both groups learned that their previous training, while excellent, was incomplete. Captain Sarah Chen, now running the tactical engineering component, created scenarios that forced impossible choices. Your patrol is ambushed. You have 3 wounded and hostile fire from 2 directions. What do you do? There were no right answers, only better and worse decisions, and students learned to make them under pressure. The failures were spectacular. Students froze, made wrong calls, got their simulated patients killed through poor prioritization. Morrison let them fail, then walked them through exactly what went wrong and why. Failure in training saves lives in combat, he told them after a particularly disastrous exercise. Every mistake you make here is a lesson bought cheap. In Afghanistan, those lessons cost blood. The successes were equally powerful. A combat medic made a 600-yard shot to eliminate a simulated sniper threatening casualties. An infantry soldier performed a needle decompression that saved a patient with tension pneumothorax. Slowly, the 2 groups stopped being medics and infantry. They became bridge protocol soldiers. 3 months into the course, Morrison received word that the program had been approved for expansion. 6 more locations, 12 more classes. The Pentagon had reviewed the data from Camel Bridge and couldn't argue with results. 47 lives saved, mission accomplished, minimal friendly casualties despite overwhelming odds. The bridge protocol was going military-wide. On graduation day, Class 1 stood at attention as Morrison addressed them one final time. You came here as specialists. You leave as complete soldiers. But here's what I need you to remember. This training doesn't make you special. It makes you responsible. Responsible for the lives of everyone you serve with. Responsible for making the hard calls when seconds matter. Responsible for being the person who can stop the bleeding or stop the threat, whichever the situation demands. He gestured to the photograph of Camel Bridge. Those 47 soldiers didn't survive because I'm some kind of superhero. They survived because I had the training to be what they needed when they needed it. Now you have that same training. Use it wisely. Use it well. And remember, we don't fight to kill. We kill to save lives. There's a difference, and that difference defines who we are. Brentwood called the class to attention. Class 1 dismissed. The graduates dispersed, heading to assignments across the military. Some would become instructors themselves. Some would use their training in combat zones. All carried with them the lesson of Camel Bridge, that the greatest warriors are those who preserve life, even when that requires taking it. 5 years later, Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Commander Morrison, now Dr. Morrison in civilian life, taught trauma surgery to a new generation of military physicians. The bridge protocol had become standard across special operations forces and was being integrated into conventional units. The division between combat arms and medical corps hadn't disappeared. Institutional inertia was too strong, but it had blurred significantly. His former students sent him messages from deployment, stories of lives saved, of tactical medical interventions that prevented casualties, of warriors who could heal and healers who could fight. The bridge protocol had saved hundreds of lives across multiple theaters of operation. On his office wall hung Mercy, the rifle that had become symbolic of the warrior-healer ideal. Its 47 hash marks were legendary now, studied at military schools as an example of precision under pressure. But Morrison knew the truth. Those marks represented his failures as much as his successes. 47 people who'd been wounded on his watch, who needed him to be 2 things at once. The real victory wasn't holding the bridge. It was creating a system where future commanders wouldn't have to choose between being a warrior and being a healer. They could be both, should be both, must be both. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Kyle Brentwood, now a captain and head instructor for Bridge Protocol East Coast Operations, entered with a young lieutenant. "Sir, this is Lieutenant Kowalski. He's requesting permission to attend Bridge Protocol Class 15. Morrison looked up, recognition dawning. Danny Kowalski from the bridge. The lieutenant, no longer the scared 19-year-old Private Morrison had carried through smoke and gunfire, snapped a salute. "Yes, sir. You saved my life that day. I spent 5 years becoming a combat leader so I could learn to do what you did, to save lives the way you saved mine." Morrison stood, returning the salute, then offering his hand. "Welcome to the protocol, Lieutenant. Class 15 starts Monday. Fair warning, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do." Kowalski's grip was firm, his eyes clear and determined. "Sir, you ran across an open bridge under enemy fire to save a private you didn't even know. Whatever Class 15 throws at me can't be harder than that." Morrison smiled. This right here, was the legacy. Not medals or commendations or legendary stories told in military bars. The legacy was young officers like Kowalski who understood that serving meant being complete, being capable of both violence and compassion, destruction and preservation. As Brentwood and Kowalski left to begin the intake process, Morrison turned back to his window, looking out over the Walter Reed campus where wounded warriors learned to rebuild their lives. Somewhere in Afghanistan, another convoy might be crossing another bridge. Another commander might face impossible choices. But now, thanks to the bridge protocol, that commander would have more tools, more training, more options. They'd be ready for both the fighting and the saving. Because the greatest warriors weren't those who killed the most enemies. They were those who saved the most lives, even when saving those lives required taking others. That was the lesson of Camel Bridge. That was Morrison's legacy. And carved into the stock of a rifle called Mercy, 47 hash marks stood as eternal proof that medics don't just fight. Sometimes they fight better than anyone else. Because they know exactly what they're fighting for. The end.